if the science says if it's the best thing for humanity and it leads to people being vibrant and healthy, then that's something I wanted to do. So, and that's what I dedicated my life to doing, and created the first hemp food commercial company in Europe, in the UK, and then came and did that in Australia and Japan and around the world.
That was Paul Benhaim, global hemp expert and co-founder of the Hemp Plastic Company. My name is Sophia Curzius, and this is the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast, or the Hemp Show. The end of March is rounding around the corner, and it's safe to say that spring has officially sprung. Today on the Hemp Show, we're speaking with Paul Benhaim. Paul has been in the hemp industry for over 30 years and is just the kind of person to listen to if you're trying to build some hemp knowledge, which I am. So let's listen after these messages.
The KP4 Hemp Cutter, introducing a revolution in hemp harvesting, setting a new standard for harvesting quality, speed, and efficiency. The KP4 prepares hemp for ideal retting and easy on-field tedding, raking, and baling. Easy to maintain and designed to withstand the punishments of hemp harvesting. The KP4 Hemp Cutter. Available only at hempcutter.com.
This episode is brought to you in part by I&D Hemp in Fort Benton, Montana, where they believe in the goodness of hemp. I&D Hemp is a family-owned, mission-driven, and environmentally focused industrial hemp food, feed, and fiber company, providing new opportunities for farmers and rural communities. Their mission is to provide innovative agricultural products and services to connect American farmers with the pioneers and businesses that see hemp as a way to bring real and lasting change to our communities and planet. Learn more at indhemp.com. Paul Benhaim, welcome to the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast. How are you doing?
G'day. I'm great, thank you, Eric.
All right. So it's an honor. I've been hearing your name for years and years now, and I'm really thankful for this chance to finally catch up with you. So you've been in this industry for over 30 years. There was a snack bar in Europe, maybe in the 90s. You published a book about hemp food in the early aughts. You founded Hemp Foods Australia. You founded a CBD company called Elixinol. And of course, you're involved in hemp plastics. I'm sure there's something I'm missing, but it is really just an honor to have you here. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you again for having me. Yeah, I've been in the hemp world for a few years. I started off in the UK. I made my way over to Australia. I've worked in Japan and Thailand and Africa and America and all throughout Europe. I'm now sitting on top of a hill in Australia, just having made it through one of the worst cyclones in our lifetime here. And so we're having this call on a generator running Starlink. So, Musk has some uses for the world, so that we can have these calls. And I won't get into politics straight away.
Yeah, we'll save politics for a little bit later.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me. These crazy conditions that you're dealing with. Hopefully everybody is safe there. Things are kind of a little easier than they were. But a cyclone, that's what here in America we call a hurricane.
Yeah, that's correct. It's pretty much the same thing as a hurricane. It's just this was quite a significant one, and I've had no running water for 7 days now. But I have a generator, and I still have access to water, so it's not too bad.
Not too bad. Well, again, I appreciate you taking this time with us. So this show, we've been covering industrial hemp for a few years now. When I talk to someone like you who's been in the space for so long and has done so many cool things, I want to hear about that initial aha moment. Like, where were you? When was it that you realized oh no, it's hemp?
Mm-hmm. Where was I? Well, I think when I first got involved, for me, we'll start with a controversial subject that, hemp and cannabis are the same thing. And they are. It's a plant, simple as that. The only difference is the legal definition, and the legal definition is related to the tetrahydrocannabinol content. So I generally, the legal definition, although we live in a world full of laws, is not that close to reality, as in reality is it's a plant and we work with one plant. And so my first introduction was, I guess as a teenager, being introduced to some hashish and smoking the plant and getting
In
high
England.
and giggling in England, where yeah, when I was quite young. And then I left to go to the Himalayas, well, actually to Asia, Thailand first. And I discovered meditation and yoga, which are things that were far from my reality of middle class London private school upbringing, but certainly changed my perspective on things, which ultimately led to me going to the Himalayas, which when you sit there, at the top of the mountain overlooking, vast valleys, it's an opportunity to really consider big picture questions. And one of the things that I ended up questioning was why people in these kind of what I was told were third world countries, who were literally living in shit, really mud, dirt, really not clean to Western standards, why these people were the healthiest, most vibrant people I'd ever met. And I sat and considered that for a long time, and I put it down to a couple of things. One is food and one is community. So that's the short story of it. But so I've spent most of my life studying community, what that means living together in harmony and ultimately in harmony with nature, and what eating natural foods as close to in harmony with nature means, which led me to studying food and nutrition while sitting in the Himalayas, which led me to finding about essential fatty acids before pretty much anyone except Udo Erasmus had talked about it. And then discovering that hemp was one of the best sources of those essential fatty acids. So I ended up meeting with Udo, Dr. Erasmus, and he shared with me that the reason he wasn't promoting hemp was because the connotations of it being an illegal plant. And that was actually my main inspiration, that someone who was so profoundly like the best in the world at understanding essential fats, saying that the best source of essential fats he wouldn't promote because he was ultimately scared. He didn't use the word scared, but that's what it was clear to me. So as a young, naive young man, I decided that I don't care if the science says if it's the best thing for humanity and it leads to people being vibrant and healthy, then that's something I wanted to do. So, and that's what I dedicated my life to doing, and created the first hemp food commercial company in Europe, in the UK, and then spread throughout Europe, and then came and did that in Australia and Japan and around the world, basically.
So the book you published in 2003, the title is Healthy Eating Made Possible. It's an acronym. Talk about that book, writing that book, and maybe how the hemp food industry has changed since then, either as a result of your book or just as a result of the way things change.
Well, I started writing that book in the 90s. It took about 6 years to write. I started in the Himalayas in that journey, I guess, and I wrote a lot of it in Greece, actually, under the stars, eating olives and wine only diet. And it was predominantly a poetry book, and I took it to London publishers, and they loved the idea of it, and they basically cut out all the poetry and said, let's just focus on hemp. I'm like, okay. And sadly, I lost all that poetry. I don't know how, but in those days, digital records weren't as clear. Yeah, after 6 years, it was a London publisher, and they published a lot of my work, which was not just about hemp, but it was about healthy eating. That's hence the acronym. And it was about, and the more I studied healthy eating, it led me to understanding that healthy eating is not just about eating. You can't just narrow it down to one thing, and then it becomes a lifestyle, and which led me to studying things like Tibetan medicine, Chinese medicine, permaculture, and living with natural products in many different forms, which kept strengthening my interest in hemp itself, because hemp had a solution to many of these things, including the toxic building materials, the toxic fabrics, and many other things that hemp has to offer these days now. So yeah, I promoted all of these things as the reason why I saw people becoming so vibrant and healthy, and decided to share that. Half of the book became a recipe book. They liked recipe books, the publisher, so I followed them and published that book. They published it in a number of different languages. I think Italian, Czech. They sold more in Czech Republic than anywhere else, and I didn't really know anything about Czech before the country, which was Czechoslovakia, I think, in the day. And yeah, so that was really interesting. And they hardly sold any. I made absolutely no money from that book, and that was a lesson in publishing. And I've since published 14 more books, all myself, which sold far more than my original book, and because they took that original book out of publication. I still have it as a PDF format, so I give it away or sell it, whatever, to whoever wants that book. It has amazing recipes in it still. Every time I look at it every few years, I'm going, wow, I really made some unusual and special recipes. And so it's still a pleasure to share a lot of that information. And most of it is completely true and still foundational to what I consider a healthy lifestyle. So I'm very proud of my first book and my ongoing books, but which are just more, I guess, smaller, the later books, just to give people a more detailed focus on everything from hemp building, hemp cosmetics, hemp textiles, growing hemp for profit, etc., and giving people what they were interested in understanding and kept asking me. I didn't create FAQs in those days. I just created books for them and said, like, here you go, here's all the information, go and do it yourself, because we need as many people in the world as possible getting involved with this industry. So and that was great, but now people's attention has moved away from being able to read a book to can't even watch a video for 3 minutes. They have a 10-second attention span. So now it's more about what's the title on your Instagram video, because they're not even going to watch the video these days. So it's a different generation of communication. But I feel that as long as you communicate from the heart, as long as you truly connect with people, that people will hear you if you have something real to say, because people are fed up with hearing sales spiels and just things that aren't very deep, and we've had enough of all that information these days.
Back in 2018, I interviewed a guy by the name of Gabriel Edinson. And I assume you know Gabe. You may have hired him, right? I haven't followed up with him lately. I don't know if he is still the president of Elixinol, but he was then, or one of the, like maybe the U.S. subsidiary of Elixinol Global. Mm-hmm. And it was in that conversation that I first heard the words endocannabinoid system. Like that was mind-blowing to me. Like I had no idea. It sort of like made other, my experience with cannabinoids earlier in life kind of fall into place. It sort of made sense. But I wonder if you could just explain it to us again, like for listeners who don't know what it is or, why it's important. So
sure. Firstly, Gabriel, I'll mention him. He is still a very close friend, a good friend of mine. No, we both of us no longer work for Elixinol, but we both were co-founders of Elixinol. I met Gabriel, through a friend in Colorado, and really we got on well, and we didn't have a plan of doing anything together, and then we ended up spending, I guess, some of the most significant experiences of our lives together, building a company from zero to $500 million in a few years, which is for any business in any industry is quite significant. We became one of the biggest CBD companies, and which took me off my track for hemp foods that I had spent my entire career and life on, because something so fast was growing and we happened to be at the right place at the right time. So that was a great journey together, and I couldn't have wanted to do it with anyone as good as Gabriel. Of course, there was a number of other great people around, Arthur, Dave, and a bunch of other people that were really supportive and at the beginning stayed with us in that journey. Hence we're all friends still to this very day. And together we learnt about the endocannabinoid system, which again wasn't new, and there was a little bit of science about that when we first got involved with industrial hemp-sourced CBD, which is the same from any source of really. Ultimately, CBD itself is a chemical, But when we talk about CBD, we generally talk about whole spectrum plant extracts, which incorporate CBD, but also incorporate other minor cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, esters, alcohols, yeasts, and many other things as well, which all make up an entire system that affects us in the many positive ways that people do get experience from CBD. Sadly, these days, especially in places like Europe, where they've made CBD only CBD, it has different effects. So people, are still thinking they're buying the same product, but getting very different products with different results. And why do these products that do work? Why do they work? It is because of the endocannabinoid system. In fact, everybody on the planet, every living mammal, in fact, has an endocannabinoid system. So that includes you and I, as far as I'm aware. We have a blood system, a circulatory system, a nervous system in our body. We have all these different systems throughout our body, but the endocannabinoid system is something that also is throughout our body. There are receptors for both the CB1 and CB2 in our body that are present throughout different organs in our body. So liver, lungs, and throughout nervous system. Also, one of the heaviest parts in our body that contains these receptors for the endocannabinoid system is in the brain as well. So the best way I describe it is that it's like a telephone wire system. And sometimes that telephone wire system, after being used for so long, as I'm reminded here in this cyclone, gets mixed up, and some of those wires fall down for whatever reason, time, age, or just processed foods getting in the way, or chemicals, different chemicals getting in the way. So sometimes they need rewiring. So the endocannabinoid system is like a lock and a key mechanism. So the receptors in our body, and it's called endocannabinoid because endo means endogenous, means from the body, so endogenous to the body. Cannabinoid is obviously relating to the cannabis plant, which is the largest source of cannabinoids. It's not the only source of cannabinoids either. There are other natural plants that contain cannabinoids, but much smaller quantities generally. So the best source of cannabinoids is cannabis. Our body is literally made for cannabis, hence the system being called the endocannabinoid system, which until relatively recently was never taught to doctors, never taught in medicine. Like an entire system was kind of ignored. So I was informed about this about 30 years ago from some doctors that I knew actually in Luxembourg, who are part of a very small and academic society that focused on the endocannabinoid system. And I never really took much notice, but when I heard about it getting popular again in America through Charlotte's Web particularly, I went back and discovered that these people were still studying the endocannabinoid system, and that science had continued and still was continuing. So I was able to take that out to the world with Gabriel, and together we taught some doctors and physicians who are now specialists in different substances that affect the endocannabinoid system and have helped, thankfully, so many people, which is really what drove that company, really what drove our need to become successful. I mean, we didn't have a need to become successful. We had a need to share that knowledge with as many people as possible. And we were very, very excited by the results of putting that lock and key mechanism together so that people could, enjoy a better life.
I know I have. All right, so when I first started covering hemp back in 2018, the U.S. Farm Bill hadn't been signed into law yet. I knew very little about hemp. I had read the Jack Herer book 20 years before that. I was blindsided by CBD. I didn't know anything about it, right? And I learned a lot about it. And I've sort of followed the hemp industry, from the Farm Bill into what became here in the U.S. like the CBD gold rush of 2020, 2019, that time, the boom and the bust. Because my interest lies in the industrial applications, right? Like what we can make from it, what we can, food, all of those things. So CBD and the medicinal things was a surprise to me. I think it's fascinating. There's so much, health benefit around there. But I struggle, should that be part of the hemp industry, or should CBD and cannabinoidal stuff, should that be kind of in a separate bucket over there with, marijuana and other, medicinal, recreational uses of the chemical compounds in the flower. Thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that it's amazing that that's still a question after all of these years, and we answered that question for ourselves at least, as a company and as a team, and we see that there is really three industries, rather not two. So one is the medical recreational side of things, which is generally the high intoxicating substances, and I'll use that as my description. The two is industrial, means for industrial purposes. And I don't think CBD fits with either of those. So I think CBD really fits in the middle as a dietary supplement, as like all vitamins and minerals really, fit in to our, if we have to put it in a box. So I think that is the separation. Certainly have seen since CBD numerous companies taking advantage of saying, well, this is hemp and that's all you have to worry about. And I think, how hemp got in, it was interesting in terms of it being allowed as long as it was sourced from industrial hemp with less than 0.3% THC. When I heard that American regulations got away with that, I didn't. I was kind of in disbelief, but I didn't argue with it because it just made everyone's lives easier, and obviously led to what I would honestly say, with respect, is the abuse of the industry, where a number of different cannabinoids in inverted commas from industrial hemp now exist that are extremely intoxicating and not particularly safe. And it's not because hemp is not safe or cannabis is not safe. It's like anything is not safe if you abuse it. Water is one of the most deadly substances in the world. If you have too much of it, it will kill you. So it's not about the substance. It's about how people use regulation or get around regulation and law, and use that as a justification for something being okay. And I think therefore it's not a simple subject. You can't like just say, well, legislation says this, so it is this. Science says this, so it is that. It's like, well, yeah, but what is the actual effects on the end human? And if the end human is a teenager going into a petrol station buying a vape of HHC or Delta 8 or something like that, and going, well, this is from hemp, it's okay, and then being intoxicated so that they do some things that they probably wouldn't do and are not safe in a regular occasion, then no, that should be legislated, I believe, or at least accepted in the same form as the medical cannabis. Does that mean that all forms of cannabinoids should go in that bucket? No. If it's not intoxicating and not affecting you, no, I don't think they should. How to define that? Well, most of the people who define those things do not have have experience of these substances, so they can only do what they read, so they don't actually get it, we'll say. So it's quite hard for them. And how often are real people asked for their advice? Well, not that often. I mean, it does happen now, but previously, they were asking people's advice who had their own interests at heart, and that sometimes was for trade and industry, and that's also not always a bad thing either. So I guess my long and short of it is it's complicated. And ultimately, it comes down to belief systems, and do we believe that people should be given the responsibility for their own bodies? Should people be given the responsibility for what they choose to consume and use? I do believe that they should, and I do believe that comes with the responsibility of government not to put boundaries around it, because we've seen that numerous times in history, that you put boundaries around something that people want, it's not going to stop it. Prohibition doesn't work. That's clear and has been clear for a long time. So rather than trying to fight the upstream battle of the river coming down, or the waterfall coming down in this case, it's learning to educate people and say, look, hey, this waterfall's dangerous. If you go down this route, it can be dangerous if you do it this way. And this is the recommended way you do it. And this is where, if you're over this age, you can do this. If you're under this age, we don't recommend you do that. And for these reasons, and because people are not silly. But again, that also becomes challenging from the society that we live in, where people do have a very low attention span and don't go into details. So again, the long and short of it, it's a complicated issue.
So, like linguistically, right, we've had this word hemp in English for hundreds of years, right? Hundreds of years. And it meant, what, you're shaking your head? You don't think we've had it that long? Or, um,
I mean, the word, I mean, the word hemp is just a common term for cannabis, and cannabis is the Latin name that has been around forever.
right.
And hemp is a term for cannabis that is non-intoxicating. Ultimately, they didn't define it as that. It was more the original definitions were from Europe, where they were less than a percentage of THC, which is the intoxicating substances.
I mean, they didn't know about THC back in the day, but and hemp, they used hemp to make the ropes and the sails and the clothes. And I imagine there was some, medicinal part of the cannabis plant that people knew about. But when people said hemp, they meant the thing that you grow to make the ropes and the things. So I guess my point is, like, linguistically, historically, hemp meant this one thing. But then 21st century, now hemp means a little something else too, with the CBD and cannabinoid thing. So I'm just curious about that. I'm like, what do we do with that? Because it seems like there is this battle between like the CBD hemp, the hemp beverages, the industrial hemp, the marijuana. It's a fascinating sort of, landscape.
Being a global citizen, I would say that's quite a US centric perspective, because only the US made that definition murky, to be honest. But the rest of the world sees hemp as hemp, or did see hemp as hemp until the US led the way and said, "Hey, we know how to get around these rules. We can do what we like." And then it became murky, and then Europe started to follow, and then then the European government started to say, "Hey, you can't do that." And yeah, so as I said, it is complicated, and it is now. It's hard. Every time I'm saying I'm in the hemp industry, some people think I'm talking about cannabinoids, and I'm like, no, no, no. I wasn't even considering that part of the hemp industry. But it is part of it as well. So, and ultimately, it's all one plant. So this
All one plant, exactly.
conversation is a little bit, strange, that it gets so much attention in the conversation, when the conversation should really be about, okay, how do we use this plant positively? And there are so many different uses to how it can be used positively in plastics, biofuel, textiles, the truly industrial uses of animal bedding and mulch and mats, and the list goes on, obviously. So
Potentially disrupt almost every industry, right?
I don't think it can disrupt every industry. I think it can. I think, again, for me, that's an extreme statement that I grew up learning, saying, repeating, and then proving to myself that that wasn't true. And more was an excuse for people saying, "Why? Well, this is why it's not successful, is because we have all these industries against us." I think we did for a time, for a time, from the Hearst and days, Randolph Hearst days. But I think that has changed now, and industry has grown up, and we need to grow our story up and step up to the plate. And what I mean by that is that, like, if we want to use hemp as an alternative, then we have to prove it. It is worthy of a modern alternative, using all the modern technologies that we have, and new understandings of science, and how other synthetic chemicals get used in our world. And ultimately, we will choose. I say we, as in human consumers, will choose by where we spend our money. So, why don't we all wear hemp textiles? Well, hemp textiles are absolutely better than cotton textiles for numerous reasons. Having synthetic fibers against our skin that don't let our skin breathe. Using things like cotton that uses more water than hemp significantly. Having microplastics come from many of our textile industry, having a textile industry that has like nearly 80% of its production as a waste stream. These are all negative things, where hemp is as textiles, is not perfect, but it is significantly better, where it breathes, it feels better, leaves much less waste, etc. And is more expensive. So therefore, it's still a niche part of our industry, and to catch up takes a lot of effort, because the big behemoths that run these textile industry, and it's the same. I'm just using that as an example because it's similar in all the types of uses of hemp, needs to catch up with the regular industry to be close as possible to in terms of cost effectiveness, but with better, more environmentally friendly benefits. And I think it's at that stage where we humans will then make the choice, because it's a no-brainer. But still, it's hard these days because of the financial system that we live in. And again, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because it's a big rabbit hole, but it is a big rabbit hole that affects every part of life. And all of these kind of bigger questions about why hemp isn't successful is because, well, hemp is now thrown into this system that is designed for growth, that is designed to create more and more, in a world where greed and having more is okay. This is a challenge in itself that does affect people's decisions and does affect the industries, and therefore the consequences that these industries bring to the world. And I think nearly, every place in the world has done that. And I won't jump to you said you're going to ask me about my global travels later, but in Africa, where I'm starting to work today, it's like the last continent that hasn't been completely and utterly demolished by these systems, but has the potential to be, on one hand, and on the other hand has the potential to be the best solution or the best opportunity for using these solutions to show a new earth, a better way to live, without just pure greed and growth as being the driving factors.
It's like we need to think long term rather than short term, and that's what our systems now are, just set up for short term profits and shareholders and all that.
Yeah, no, we can't change that easily. That's not so we have to live in reality, in my opinion, and the reality is exactly that. We have to live with that existing reality of where we are today, and we have to admit that before we get to move on to where we're going. Otherwise, if we just try to jump to the idealistic way of where we're going, that's what I did in my early career, and I found myself, in a bit of an uphill battle there. Now I've kind of found the balance, with some of my current businesses, particularly in the bioplastic space, to understand how we can live in the present moment and make change for the future.
We'll get back to Africa and some of your other world travels in a bit, but yeah, let's talk about hemp plastic. Last October, I was given a harmonica from a listener, Dennis Farley, California. The great harmonica, and the comb inside of it is made from hemp plastic, which he sourced from you. So I assume you know Dennis. And so it's a great harmonica. It was a really wonderful, special gift here. Because I'm a harmonica player, I'm a musician, so that was a really well-placed gift. Thank you, Dennis, if you're listening. So my question now is, take me from the hemp in the field to the hemp in the harmonica. I get the process of, chopping, retting, decortication, but what happens after that? How does it turn into plastic?
Well, I'll go into that story, but first of all, yeah, it's people like Dennis that are literally changing the world. So, I have big kudos to people like that. No matter how big or small your project, by taking action with your ideas is the biggest thing that we can do on this planet. So yeah, really a big appreciations to people like that. Especially, it wasn't easy probably for Dennis to work with our company, because we are focused on bigger companies, and not because we don't want to support the little people. It's because we have a need to survive ourselves. We don't have enough funding to grow at the speed that we could be growing at, and that is now our priority, to make the biggest change on the planet so that we can help the smaller people, and make that more viable, I guess. So coming back to plastics and how it's made, again, I created the first hemp plastics since I read about hemp plastics. And when I first read about hemp plastics, it was from Jack Herrera in The Emperor Wears No Clothes. And I learned there that Henry Ford had used it in one of his cars, probably, maybe. But it was the inspiration that I had, and I had many people in the industry talk about. And I really wanted to give my time to help that. But the more research I did, the more I realized that, well, maybe that it contained a tiny bit of hemp in that car, and no one had ever done that before or after Henry Ford. So because at that time I was relatively successful in my hemp foods in the UK, I was able to fund some independent studies and consultancy work to look into the use of hemp as a plastic. And I did that and created the first hemp plastic product since Henry Ford. And that was the hemp frisbee. We called it High Fly. And that was supported by a number of different companies around the world, where we put their logos on it. And that was an exciting first project. Looking back on it, it was technically pretty bad product, but it existed. It was real, and for that product, we were using hemp fibers to reinforce plastics. So that was hemp fiber reinforced plastics. I'm going to jump a little bit to the end for a second, where we call our company the Hemp Plastic Company today, and in my career of working with hemp plastics, one of the technologies that I discovered was in Europe, which is 100% hemp material. It's what we made didgeridoos from, as the most famous example. I still use them today. They're still made today. They are still the best quality didgeridoos in the world, which is a musical instrument. For those who don't know, it's an Australian one. So it's a very niche product, but it worked perfectly for that. But this material was ideal in every shape and form. And it's what I moved to from the kind of frisbee kind of hemp CD world, because I thought it was amazing. And I spent 6 years trying to commercialize that business. And instead, what I did was what people had done before me and what people have done since, is put millions of dollars into research and development. And one of the biggest lessons I learned about that is, no matter how amazing a material is, how amazingly it works in a laboratory in a small scale, unless you can scale up something, it's not going to make a massive difference in the world. So yeah, sure, they've made tens of thousands of didgeridoos, hooray, hurrah, which will change the didgeridoo world. But how much is the didgeridoo world going to change the actual world? A little bit, and every little step counts. So don't get me wrong. I'm just the kind of guy that likes to fix, and as time goes on, bigger and bigger problems. So I really wanted to fix the plastics industry at the beginning, and I still do. And and the waste that we see, and that's also something I saw in the Himalayas, all the waste, plastic waste, and the effects on our water system, our human health. Which is just getting worse and worse. Like today, 50,000 particles of plastic enter the human system every year for everyone on this planet, whether you use plastics or not. So like in my area, people are very much anti-plastics. Is like, well, that's great, and you're still going to consume plastics from the air and the water you drink, no matter where you get your water, from the stream or from the rain, and in any system, you're going to consume that just from breathing and existing on this planet, because that is how widespread our plastic is. It's particularly in foods and the oceans. The fish and the meat, they all has microparticles in these days. So so I created the Hemp Plastic Company because the 100% hemp material, where I was going with that, was an ideal material but couldn't be scaled. And the person that I got this technology from, who I worked with in this facility, who still works with this material and still hopes for it to continue, and I'm sure it will still be used. I love the product. I have vases and things around my office, made from that material, and bolt and plates, and we work with some amazing designers. But he was really against me using the word plastic, so we never called it plastics in that particular business. But the reason I stuck with the word plastics, is because, yeah, I get it. The regular connotation of the word plastics is fossil fuel or oil-based plastics. But the reality, if you look in the dictionary, is plastics means any moldable substance. So I'm like, well, hemp is a moldable substance because I'm making it into plastic, so I can call it hemp plastics. And that's why I did, and I do still today, call our material hemp plastics. So your question originally was, how do you make the stuff? And the reason I had to go into that description is because, hemp plastics means a moldable substance made from or using hemp. Now that covers many types of technologies, which covers many different ways you can make that. In that particular 100% hemp example, all we do, I say all we do, and it's really not easy to copy or to do, but we chop hemp down. We take the cellulose out of hemp, and then we chop it down into fine particles. We wet it into a slush, and then we mold it into a form, and then we take the water out. It dries, and then you have something as strong as steel. It can be as strong as steel, and it's 100% hemp, biodegradable, no glues, resin. Sounds fantastic, except it's not very controllable. And we spent many millions of dollars and some of the best scientists and engineers in the world to try and fix these problems. Everyone keeps saying, "Yeah, I can do it. We can do it." It's like, yeah, no one did it yet. So if that's a problem you think you can solve, good luck. But please don't ask me about that because I gave my 6 years of time for that, and I've now moved on to what I want to do, which is to create a material that maybe not as ideal, and comes down to the balance. It's not 100% hemp, but it has the ability to scale and make the biggest difference in the world in terms of biomass of materials being substituted. So my goal is to substitute as much fossil fuels as I can with hemp. Now, you would think that having 100% hemp is going to substitute as much fossil fuels as possible, but no, actually we now produce materials that are generally 25% hemp and 75% regular fossil fuels. So we only, in inverted commas, making 25% difference, but that 25% difference is far more cost effective, far more scalable, and doesn't require any specifically new machinery, which means that you can use these materials in any regular injection molding machine or rotor molding or blow molding or whatever machinery you want to do to use that exists all around the world as standardized equipment. So we can put our material in anything like that. So that is why we are now shipping tanker loads and truck loads of and very soon train loads of material this year around the country in America. So this is American made from American hemp into American products from different suppliers around the country, and ultimately, we spent 6 years in R&D stage really in this new company, and out of the last, we'll say 8 years, and we're only really starting our commercial scale up now. And just starting our commercial scale up, we jumped from zero to many millions of dollars very quickly from one customer kind of level, because that's the scale that we've designed this business for. And it's very possible that we can grow this extremely rapidly. So and the scale, as I'll keep coming back to, is for me the focus and the key, because scale shows that there is a use for it in a large scale, which means that people are going to use this, which means that ultimately hemp plastics potentially, most likely, will use more hemp biomass than anything else in the world. Now, there are many hemp plastic companies as well. But everyone makes it in different ways. So you can use the fiber, you can use the herd, you can use all different parts of the plant. And ultimately what we're doing is we're taking a part of the hemp plant, and does it matter what part? Not really, because and that we've made it so it doesn't matter what really, and it's all about actually filling getting rid of the 25% of fossil fuels with some form of hemp biomass. So we've managed to stabilize that to create hemp plastic pellets. So we only sell hemp plastic pellets. Before any of your listeners call us up and say, "Hey, can you make this? Can you make a harmonica for us?" It's like, no, sorry, Dennis made the harmonica, and you can make whatever product you want, but you need to go and find your injection molder. We just sell you the pellets, so that and we'll make your injection molder comfortable that they can just put it into place. So we now make car parts from it. We make consumer product goods from it. We like Tiger coolers. Make a hemp plastic cooler now. There are hemp plastic packaging. You can make hemp plastic sheeting for architectural use, and the list goes on, because literally you can make many thousands of things from different types of hemp plastics. We make it in all different formulas. We custom make formulas for companies, but we usually only for companies that are going to buy it in truckloads or train loads, because we simply are still a very small company, and we still need, I guess, financial support to grow and to be able to supply the demand, not only in America but around the world, from companies who are in countries that are growing hemp to want to use hemp as a plastic.
Right. Yeah. When you talk about scale, that, like, I work here at Lancaster Farming newspaper. We're an agricultural newspaper. This whole thing started for me because this is opportunity for farmers. And
Yep.
so when you say scale, I hear more acreage.
Yes, exactly, and same with me too. And I, just to be clear, I started working with farmers because I had to at the beginning, because I literally had to go and source the hemp. Who grew it? When I first started, it was Hungarian farmers that had been growing it through as far back as history records went. Then that turned into small scale farming in the universities farming, and now it's grown into obviously commercial farming all over the world. And the farmers are literally the backbone to our society. And without their support, we are not going to make a change in the world. So we need to make a sustainable crop for farmers. But I've also seen the mistakes happen all over the world, the same over, where everyone's gone to farmers and say, hey, you should grow hemp, and we'll contract you to grow hemp, and they do that, and then they don't actually have an end use for it. So without having the end use for the hemp, those farmers then find themselves with a crop that didn't get paid for, and then won't grow hemp again. So my goal is to always focus on the end market first. So find the end customer, and it's the same for people who want our hemp plastics. Is like, great, have you got an end customer? Don't just buy hemp plastic to make a new product. How about buy hemp plastic and go and sell it to someone already creating a product that should be made of hemp plastic? What products are that? Well, any products really, if they want to have a more sustainable product opportunity.
So you're a musician, is that true? Do you play anything besides the didgeridoo?
No.
Just the didgeridoo?
The didgeridoo.
All right.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of didgeridoos here in the U.S., but I feel like that should change, right? We need more Aboriginal Australian music here.
I agree.
All right, so you've been traveling the world, probably most of your adult life, but lately I know you were cruising around Africa with Morris Beagle and a few other folks. So yeah, tell me some of the bright spots that you see in the world with hemp. You mentioned Africa already. If you want to dig in there and tell me more of what you saw.
Sure. Well, the bright spots are everywhere. The potential is for everyone to do some great things using this wonderful plant, which, as you mentioned earlier, starts with the farm. And we need to have good farming practices, good sustainable regenerative agriculture practices, ideally, which connect with primary processing usage, which connect to ultimately the end market. So is there an end market demand? And that's probably the biggest challenge I saw in Africa, is that people are still coming out of survival mode in some respects. And survival mode means we need to make sure we got food and shelter to start with. Well, guess what? Hemp provides one of the best sources of food and one of the simplest and easiest ways to create shelter. So as in building materials and building from hemp. And these are real opportunities with hemp. These are globally available opportunities for people to take advantage of when you use the seed and the stalk to make food, building, plastics. Those three things can absolutely be used everywhere. But in Africa, like we discussed earlier with most countries in the world, the price of the end product is quite important. So what we're trying to do in Africa, and we started in Kenya, we did a bit in Zimbabwe, and we did some in South Africa, and that work continues in countries. Will continue in countries like Botswana and Nigeria and many other places. Is that we're looking for commercial ways to grow hemp for these bigger uses, but working with hopefully smaller scale farming, as they do in China, and I can come back to that later, but in a way where the actual farmers can use some of the crop themselves. So we want to educate the farmers so that they don't have to like grow to take to a larger processor and then a larger processor and then be exported around the world. That's not super sustainable. And it's still better than doing that with other negative products that take chemicals and ruin the soil. What we're trying to do is to offer them an opportunity to grow a crop where they can use it for their own food. They can use it to make their own building materials and maybe even their own textiles, and then sell the rest of it into the processes and up the chain in that regard. And I'm trying to create the market personally in, again, plastics as my focus, but that gets used in Africa, processed in Africa for Africans, that doesn't get exported because it's cheaper. So yeah, there is a local circular economy. Now, of course, that has to be connected to a global economy because we are in a global world these days. So again, you can't be too idealistic and expect everything to stay locally. But if that is the primary focus, which it certainly is for our company, is to support local countries to use our technology so that we can license out the 33 patents that we have to produce hemp plastics in the cheapest way possible, which is why we can beat every other company in this industry. And it's not about being every other company in this industry, it's about having a method of scalability that works, which is what we focused on all of this time. These are the opportunities for not only Africans, but from any continent and any country on this planet. And before Africa, I was in Asia, and I've spent the last few years in Asia, in Thailand particularly. I've also worked in Japan, but in Thailand, where the industry was spurred ahead by the, I guess, legal use of, I say legal in quite a light term. In Thailand, it's extremely complicated, which we won't go into. But in terms of the legal use of hemp and cannabis in that world, giving them an opportunity to actually work with the industrial uses. So we are working with a number of the biggest public companies in Thailand today so that they can use hemp for truly industrial uses, and which is extremely important in countries like that consume more plastics than we do in the West even. So the opportunities are fascinating throughout the world, and there are many countries, and thanks to exhibitions like NOCO and in Colorado, it brings people from all around the world, and the Asian hemp federations, supporting these conferences in Bangkok, and we're going to be having one in South Africa next year, I think. And the intention is to bring people from around the world so we can learn from each other, so we don't have to repeat the same, not just mistakes, but not have to repeat the same thing. So we're trying to be more efficient with our processes so that we can grow our industry by working together rather than working individually and then competing in the old world model where someone has to be better than the other person or be bigger than the other company. It's like, it doesn't really, that is not the future vision that I see for this world. I see us working cooperatively.
Yeah, we have to achieve a new paradigm of working together, right? Because the old ways are not working.
Working together works.
That reminds me of something Patrick Atagi says. Yeah, Patrick Atagi from the National Industrial Hemp Council of America. And he was with you over there in Africa for a little bit.
He was indeed, yeah, and we're very proud members of the NIHC who are doing some really great work in supporting actually American farmers and the industrial hemp industry in the world from growing. So yeah, I think it's again, if you're not a part of the NIHC, I highly recommend that anyone truly interested in hemp becomes part of working together ultimately through groups like the NIHC.
Yeah, I went with the NIHC last summer, part of a delegation to Prague for the European Industrial Hemp Association conference. That was amazing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot of great people in this space. Any thoughts on the hemp seed meal as a livestock feed? It was voted on by our officials last year, AFCO, as a feed for laying hens. There was some controversy around the cannabinoid content limits. So I don't know. Do you want to talk about that at all?
I don't think I'm going to go into that in detail today, but I'll just say, I found that kind of a ridiculous situation globally, and in Australia, it's where I'm based right now. Is quite similar. It's like it took me, just to be clear, 17 years to change the legislation in Australia to allow hemp as a food, and even though we made hemp as a food. Medical cannabis was legalized before hemp as a food was legalized in Australia. So, it shows you how backwards Australia is. But in some respects, and as a animal feed, it was illegal also, which I found fascinating. That it was harder to get hemp legalized as an animal feed than it was for human feed. And it seemed to be the same in America, but it was never like that in Europe. And in fact, and that's why hemp seeds, and that's why I was able, I guess, to start my hemp foods business in Europe, because there was no legislation ever against hemp seeds as a food or for any particular reason. And the reason being was that hemp was always and has been used as a bird feed, particularly. So yeah, I think it's hemp obviously should be used as an animal feed, and I've never seen any negative things. I fed my chickens and had very happy hens and very good eggs with it. So yeah,
I know there's some hope. I don't know if hope is the right word, but like our political climate just changed here, right? Can you talk about climate change when you talk about Washington? I don't know if we're allowed to do that anymore, but
yeah,
it's a whole new.
we certainly can, because I am supported by the U.S. government these days to go to.
How do you mean by that? Explain why you're supported by the U.S. government.
Well, to support, because I have a U.S. company. The Hemp Plastic Company is a U.S. company focusing on U.S. farmers and U.S. business. So they support me going around and using my decades of experience to support a US business, because I literally don't have a business in Australia doing that really right now, not hemp plastics. So I go around doing that for them, and one of the places they sent me was as a delegate to the United Nations Conference of Parties in Azerbaijan recently, which was all about climate change, which I thought America was not really part of, and have now left that process since Trump has come in. But what I found out, that people on the ground in the US, senators, US politicians, number of very powerful US people were there, all fully supporting the efforts to make a difference with climate change. So I was there representing US Department of Agriculture, specifically obviously with hemp as a crop that could store carbon and sequester carbon from the atmosphere into hemp as a building material, as plastics, and as other uses, of course. So that was, yeah, I can say that the U.S. government are supportive, under the top level. At the top level, they seem not supportive and seem to be climate change deniers. But as I said, I'm literally still in a power cut, and my computer battery will run out soon, actually.
Okay.
So if it does, I apologize for that, because I'm literally still in the tail end of a cyclone.
Right.
So yeah,
Well,
climate change is real, and I believe, and I think there's a lot of scientists and a lot of really clever people and a lot of U.S. Government people who really believe and say, and what I heard them say is, we in closed rooms. So I can't say who said this, but I can say that they said, doesn't matter who's at the top in Washington, we will fight climate change because we need to. Otherwise, as a human species, we will not exist in our lifetime. So it's a real problem, and that is a big driver for everything that I do, is in terms of sustainability. And sustainability includes the human race surviving these times.
amen to that. So I know your battery's about to die. We're coming up against time. I have a few other questions, but I'm going to scrap those because I want to hear about what you're up to lately. Like, what's your new passion? What's your new project above and beyond hemp plastic?
Oh, well, hemp plastics is definitely my main project. Supporting US farmers is my second biggest thing that I really care about, and I continue doing keynote speaking around the world for that. But one of the things that I discovered, while I had a break, particularly in COVID, was that the use of psychedelics was increasing for mental health therapy. And mental health is definitely an issue that has continued to grow through COVID and climate change and anxiety and all these other things that are being created. And of course, cannabis has its part to play in that. But traditional psychedelics like psilocybin and MDMA were being used, and I got involved with the scientists from Imperial College London and throughout the US and all around the world, really, to look into that world, and actually founded a psilocybin manufacturing company, which is the only thing I've ever done outside of cannabis in my life. But that I realized that was just a lesson to learn that we can actually use cannabis as a true psychedelic to gain insights from the plant world to support us through these challenging times. So I created Cannabis Psychedelics. So cannabispsychedelics.com.au is the website, which explains more about what I do. But ultimately, it's a process where you use cannabis as a medicine, as a true medicine through ritual use, through using sound technology, vibrational frequency journeys, to offer people an experience where they get to commune with the plant spirit of cannabis, to get some ideas and illuminations on their existing reality and maybe where they're going. And so I've been doing that now, and now train facilitators in that modality. And it has been the most life-changing thing I've ever done for individuals. So it's quite different from my corporate work, and it's more of a not-for-profit small venture that I have on the side, but is helping people one-on-one in a very significant world. And having friends like Gabriel in Colorado doing similar now, and it's completely legal in the US. It's wonderful to support the healing of people in our world.
That's incredible. I know we're running out of time. I would love to learn more about that, and maybe we talk again in the future. Real quick, you mentioned in the beginning of the interview that you sort of got into yoga and meditation earlier on. Do you still have a practice, and can you briefly describe that?
Yeah, sure. I practice, I guess I practice meditation in a different way than I used to. I used to sit in caves and sit quietly and silently. I still sit quietly and silently, and in fact, I love silence these days. But my practice is more around dancing. Actually, I use the 5 rhythms, kind of an ecstatic dance science, which was developed in California from Gabriel Roth as my main, physical active meditation. But I find everything in life is a meditation, and that we should really bring and what that means to me is awareness of what we do at every moment in time. And that can be done in business, it can be done in interviews, it can be done eating a meal, it can be done in a conversation at your post office, or it can be done anywhere at any time with anyone on this planet. And bringing people to presence is the foundation to how I've created culture throughout business around the world. And I'm very honored to be able to share some of those ancient technologies through everything that I do.
It's the power of now, right? Yeah. Wow. Paul Benhaim, it has been just a pleasure to talk to you today. I would love to talk to you again in the future, because I feel like I could just ask you lots of different questions. So thank you so much.
Been a pleasure. Thank you very much for having us, Eric, and thank you to all your listeners for supporting the education about industrial hemp and cannabis and all that it offers for a sustainable world. I look forward to working with you all together so that we can grow our industry to become something of a significant change for a positive future in this world. Thanks for listening.
That was Paul Benhaim. Thank you for listening to The Hemp Show. I'm Sophia Curzius. If you have any questions or comments, you can email us at podcast@lancasterfarming.com, or check us out online at our website, lancasterfarming.com, where you can also sign up for the hemp newsletter. So until next time, I'll see you in the newspaper.
Industrial hemp.
This episode of the Lancaster Farming Industrial Hemp Podcast is copyright 2025 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family. Today's show is written and recorded, edited and produced by Eric Herlock and Sophia Curzius. The music you hear throughout the show is courtesy of Tin Bird Shadow.